Greetings. This is General of the Armies, Vincent Diaz Jr. This is a communication in regards to the war in Ukraine to Vladimir Putin with attention to my god boss, the 7-star general from Russia, who doesn't really exactly have a name or a title, although holds some of the highest rank. With CC for people who are supposed to be in line with the communications in the series of Stalin-controlled communications, like being able to keep up with stories about Stalin on the TV, having made your choices right instead of against the reality of these stories about Stalin. First, a little housekeeping on my hardship on getting my points out for my orders for orders and my commentary on the news stream on topic. I pulled together a thought I was missing about President of the USA's recent behavior and his gaffe. I think at this point, I'm going to try to control this with my Nazi agenda and sort of talk like a talk jock on the radio. Those clowns in Congress need to get this clown for his clowning around from these international clowns of a Justice League to put down a gag order on old Grandpa Gaff and maybe some of these other people. I'm not exactly sure how the communications are going, but in this international clowning of these clowns, because things can't go by the book like some of us really want, like our books and all our codes say it's supposed to go. Old Grandpa Gaff could really use some help with a warning from a top clown who might want to take him down in the worst sort of way, like he's sort of talking about doing wrong to someone who doesn't need to pay. And he could use this warning that gag orders can get a person, so the next gaffe can maybe be controlled so it doesn't have to be that bad and it can just be a gaffe punishment or whatever. I guess I'm going to roll across some Cold War terms and try to get to my Stalin stories. Let's see, it's been requested by intelligence from some of our civilian forces, sort of like the family protectors who are all stuck up in the gangle-grongle but aren't exactly gang raiders, to try to have this talk I'm working on about super weapons, and I've been having a hard time really wanting to get it out, sort of having to talk of some of my duty with what's happening in the news. And I'm supposed to break down into Cold War terms. So I guess where I'm at, like I'm mostly asking for help and sort of starting a dialogue and sort of getting out my lecture points or my essay I've memorized or whatever around this talk of the development of super weapons beyond nuclear weapons, use of super weapons, not nuclear weapons, use of nuclear super weapons, maybe some basic definition of what a super weapon is. I sort of forget, I'm giving examples. Oh yeah, it would be nice to get these terms vagued out and generalized so big. We can talk about some of our super weapons almost everybody agrees for the use of, like something like above a megaton intercontinental ballistic missiles, I think all count as super weapons, and almost all militaries agree on their use with fair rules of war. And I'd sort of like some vague terms to go down so we could get some terms through to these people about our rule set to stop their knee-jerk and sort of control Grandpa Gaff before he has a big guffaw, draw and ad-lib about wanting to waste somebody because we got some new sort of super weapon of a pepper spray going on out there, and it's even safer than a pepper spray, but we got it in a big gas canister or something. And I just maybe want to use these vague and generalized terms, like maybe we can even go over how not to, and we can go through maybe some of the sarin attacks and stuff, talking about not doing this and trying to cover these bases about. In a lot of ways, after a war goes on long enough, or the opposition is sort of lost it enough, they'll get out there and try to blame these attacks on you and set you up for them with espionage and stuff. And then they knee-jerk and gaff, and they come roaring out the way they're just supposed to have their heads cut off, like they're almost already just a chicken with its head cut off, running around saying the sky is falling. While covering uses of our nuclear, chemical, and biological super weapons, such as chemical weapons, like chemical weapon use is perfectly fair and never in the way like I'm talking about some of these macings and pepper sprayings and such, which is why I'm trying to say in the terms of a new one. So I guess I'm gonna roll into my Stalin stories. That's probably enough. My god boss, who sort of counts as a Stalin, I think he sort of showed up in what we're sort of calling light astrate. It's his automated form at the facilities he is creator, designer, and master of, as well as he sort of explains are pulled from outer space and are chunks of his body because he's actually a constellation of constellations that does have a physical form that looks like a human, which is just another piece of his constellation connected to the rest. And that's sort of what I am. I was recently captured. This might have even ended up settling out in Donbass. Sometimes I forget I'm sort of localized to a lie, like I'm in a simulator, like we do with our modern day warfare. Like there's a lot of simulation of battles to be, or battles from before, like they're redone, with a lot of control people don't realize is sort of right in front of their eyes, where our training grounds to simulate are set up so we can actually sort of switch over to the combat zone reality and not really know it. Anyway, God Boss had just had some facilities stolen, and I was up for my next battle with the people who are falsely in uniform, pretending there's still that uniform to be in that can be counted as what it identifies as in terms of a national force or a local force. With the reality being that's done and over with, they're gone. That thing was barely ever a reality. Like, I might have been the only one ever in those uniforms that upheld duty right to count as an actual allowed and duty member on duty still, instead of barred by ethics issues. So in this case, God Boss was sort of teaching me, because I was sort of slammed down into a cell in a facility that had been retrofitted to sort of be a not even a jail. It's not right to call it a jail. We have so many rules about jails. They weren't followed at all. It was obviously not one. But sort of like it, like everybody was either playing dumb or one of them, or just broken and dumb as hell and thinking it was a jail. And I had to actually deal with all the prisoner population too, when I was supposed to be in my proper general's quarters like in the movies. Big ass room or something, all alone. Maybe with a cage in it for part of their fight. Wasting with. They lost it. They had totally lost it. They just slammed me down into this thing because they can't beat me at combat, and then with me controlled into this location, like I've totally given up on even getting into their housing of any sort, let alone any sort of horror housing like this, because they're endlessly streaming attacks at me, and I really just don't want to be stuck indoors with them. It's endlessly assault and attack with stuff beyond punching, stabbing, kicking, shooting and stuff. There was sort of the force that slammed me down, also the force that had sort of stolen the facility and was retrofitting it. I got into the facility at a point during the retrofit where I might have been the first person, where they wanted to grab me up to usurp the power of my rank to try to get some of the work done, where I did manage to get in there with God Boss in a way we had some control. And while this was about the worst of my life, it wasn't the worst of my life in some of the basic terms on how bad these things can go when they get to fully control the facility and retrofit it. Like, we were definitely able to alienate most of the prisoners against the guards and not have this setup where all the guards are my military enemies and then the prisoners just turn into their gangs on their side too. So sort of in the role of Stalin, my god boss finally had to get in there as they kept building up to this fiasco I've had to deal with, like this worst case scenario where they've slammed you into a cell and they're just going to come at you with everything they've got there. It's the biggest advantage they can take, which I've had to deal with, and actually just waste them with unarmed combat and stuff. A whole facility's worth, and then a whole county and state's worth for the constitutional beatdown and win in war, the federal constitution we needed. And the snapping point was they kept using chemical weapons. They were sort of mixing up their own pepper sprays and maces. They had big old bear canisters they were walking around with. They figured out a system of how to not exactly spray it in a way you might call it spraying it, and then spread it on the floor and spray them under our doors. And it was going on regularly, and we were even having to have standardized facility spill drills and such, because it was a specialized worker spill drill to even get the floor mopped after they would do this, and it was just constant. I mean, we're talking about counting the time, like after the cleaning, how long till they're back out there to hit again. Anyway, it went far enough, like they wanted to get worse. Maybe they were going to start opening our slots and just spraying us every time they come by, or in the cage, and just for fun. Or a lot of this was like they just wanted us to have to live in a spray fit of theirs every time they come by in our cage that won't clear of it. So God Boss got in there, and he actually sort of created a new super weapon, the way it sort of counts and sort of doesn't, because it's under the system they were sort of using. And he mixed up some rounds of some specialized stuff to get these guys, because they had some chemical weapon drug-like things of their own to help them get through the use of this chemical weapon of their own making. And then he used the automation. Like, I actually got to see him get these guys when he wasted them in combat in there, and I didn't really get to see his attacks and such because he was so fast, but I was definitely able to feel them, like we were starting to have this chemical blast to the face drill these guys wanted. Like, all of them wanted it, and all of them wanted it against one person. And he had to mix up 2 rounds. Like, on round 1, they still just wouldn't stop. Like, they were just sort of Nazi, zombie, cyborg, robot things. And then on round 2, he wasted them. Like, they weren't just blinded, hurt, with their eyes turned pink. They were done for. He just wasted them on round 2. It was one of the greatest joys of my life, where I've never had anybody protect me in one of these situations, where they're sort of pretending this is like a government gets to do this thing to me, and just doing this stuff in these facilities where they always do. They're never supposed to be. Oh, and he got them all, and I got to watch and totally know it was him and understand. And he stopped it. Things sort of calmed. So I wanted to start working over this term. I wasn't even really planning on telling this story about working over these terms about Stalin having the duties and having the record of being a super weapons creator. I don't have a lot of them. It's also another request. Like, I forget what it is. I'm wondering sort of where it is, because I keep asking for some readings from your book to be relayed back to me, our justice book, your justice books. Sort of wondering where the rank of Stalin has to create new super weapons. And I'm also sort of wondering about these stories I'm trying to bring back about the old Stalins creating super weapons. Oh, that brings something back. I think you can't even get the rank of Stalin right without having created or having a totally designed out, not fully finished new super weapon. Or system of super weapons, even. Like, if it's mostly in thought, I think it's supposed to be more of a system than just a new one, like you haven't clarified on the system. So I've been starting to work over some of my older memories that are still stories about Stalin, as I'm talking more about my god boss, who doesn't really go by that title, although it counts because it's a rank and a link of a chain in a chain of command he holds. This is way back when. My memories are still not quite in the timeline, right? He created a lot of video games. Like, he claims to have created most of the video games or most of the computer stuff. And this is about my interactions with his, I think it was Super Street Fighter 2 Hyper arcade game we used to have in these special, like, I think it was like zones, like there used to be like a Walmart foyer with some video games and a pop machine, sort of like where the cart corrals go. It might be now, but like a place you could stand around, sort of be at the arcade or waiting for a ride. And I got really good at that fighting game, such that its creator, Stalin, or my god boss, finally logged in, and he started to take me into training. He managed to really fry in and hammer down some of my memories, so this time I've forgotten so much is still really stuck in my mind. Like around some other stuff, like what's going on around the video. We had a Sam's or a Great Value soda machine pop up, and we had nickel sodas. I think it's about the first time I've ever been able to get a nickel vending machine soda, where I think I did give some complaints about how I was supposed to be able to get bottles in the old days out of our first vending machines for a nickel. And with my work with the fighting game, we got to sort of introduce the Westerners, again, outside of sort of World War II TV, to Stalin through representations of his character and his actual character sort of being in the game. So there's also this other story about Stalin and my interactions with Stalin. In this case, I didn't even fully know, having to do with the work of our ranks and above. And this is way back when cereal was first being invented and boxes were first being invented. And we used to have cereal boxes with language lessons on them. We were trying to get games on them, but there was a lot of call for education. Like most of our games did require the education we sort of had to undertake to put on the boxes before we could get them their games on the boxes and try to set it up so it even counts as a sort of a toy, or the box can be a toy or is a toy. And in my memories, I haven't pulled it all together, there were some of the boxes that had this special decoder lesson. I forget how we work it in, but as part of our basic language lessons, with most of my memories being around all of the Stan Lee stories being in their original creation format, with some of them sort of being an easy one, like there's just sort of a fix the broken word written out in your mind challenge to it, but it was built to lead up to editing that back to right, using the lessons of actual language while teaching these encoding and decoding lessons, where you would have a string of characters and a key that says each one of them actually equals a different character that's a letter you build the words with. And I was the one who decoded the full set of Stan Lee's first run of comic books in those basic stories about war and encoding all this old data and just all this knowledge about what those focus around, with it being fully Stalin, or my god boss sort of acting as Stalin, who created all this. And those were his stories. He wrote the stories. He created he was sort of the one responsible for the whole design and creation of our units, from being the one who could get it into factory work. Okay, that's about the story. I think I'm about done here. I remembered one more of my points. Gotta watch my Nazi agenda. I think I get to say this because I'm not in the nation and is so far and disconnected. Zelensky is talking about how he wants to behave around the negotiations. And things are just so wrong with all of this delusion. He's sort of using terms, these are definitely terms of the World War at this point, where he's sort of saying it like he still thinks he can make the case that he's the victim. And now it's sort of like he's saying stuff like he's the winner of the war. When even in some cases you can win a war and still have to concede some territory, like he's starting to talk about. Maybe he's going to give up Donbass. I have a point I'm working on about what happens if if the genocide in Donbass tries to reoccur. There's a resurgence of this work for genocide in Donbass that started this war. I was just hearing some basic terms, like if Russia has to go back into Donbass to take it again, it sort of maxes out how bad this can be in terms of the penalties from the Justice Code for them doing this. In Zelensky's terms, the last time I think I heard them was from the Swiss trying to get into a neutral state and not have a standing army when they sort of won a round of World War in that special way of starting out with those big concessions before the round even started, not having been under penalization and acting like they have the right to relay the terms of how they will behave without actually meeting the basic condition of things like restitution and reformation, such that the problem is no longer there.